Chairman, again, we've got a great crowd here this morning, don't we?
We do. We have a fabulous crowd.
Before the Georgia-Florida game.
Before the Braves game.
Before the Braves game. You know, we're excited to be here. It's Halloween.
Yeah.
Halloween. What we got going on? But I'll just get started real quick and turn it over to Chairman again, but we're just glad to be here. Yeah, I drank too much coffee on the way from Jasper this morning, so I'm starting shaking or something. You don't know what's going on. But I just appreciate the last month, the outreach some of y'all have made to me in different areas of the state, you know, about airports, about our community airports and counties and cities all across Georgia. And I just appreciate just a little input that you've given me on this. But, you know, we got to recognize somebody. It's our last day of work today.
Yep.
And we're
And I'm glad she's hard at work.
Hope she knows.
Please stand
Carol.
up. Carol, would you stand up? We appreciate your service to the state. And I guess I didn't know how much these people love you until I've been around them the last year, and they certainly do. We sure appreciate it very much. We want to introduce your person's going to follow in your footsteps, not replace you.
Clement Solomon.
Clement Solomon.
Yes, sir.
And Clement's from West Virginia. And I told him, I said, I looked at Carol's shoe size, and I said, don't let it fool you. She's got way bigger shoes than what you're looking at.
I've been chasing after her for a couple of weeks now.
Great.
Thank you.
Well, we look forward to working with you, Clement. At least folks do, especially do. Well, Chairman, again, what we got in store for them today?
Got a good meeting going on, but one of the things that I want everybody to, you know, we do a lot of different things in our world. And for me, I'm lucky enough to get to be co-chair of this committee. But I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. So for me, I watched the Braves when nobody else did. I got to see what happens in our media and what goes on in our community. And we all are part of Georgia. And, you know, last night, I came on down, spent the night last night because I had to go by the Capitol this morning. And I'm getting a phone call from Raul Dolly. Said Raul's in the back. I don't know if everybody here knows Raul. He just changed jobs. Said he's now with NPR, is that right? WABE. WABE, okay. Said the NPR station here and I had was going to the grocery store. Said and he says, well, I said, where are you at, Raul? He says, I'm here in Atlanta. And I said, well, I'm at the Kroger at Brookhaven. He said, which Kroger? I said, the one at Brookhaven, right beside McDonald's and this and that. He says, next thing I know, before I hang up the phone, he's walking in front of my car. It's a small world. We all play a part in it. And for me, said Ronald told me this a minute ago, and it's just been announced, that in case you never met her, said she was bigger than life. Jovita Moore with WSB passed away this morning. Said she had brain cancer, and for me, you know, one of the most amazing things I ever got to do in Atlanta, said back when I was a local government manager, was I got to fly with Captain Herb Emery. Said many of y'all knew who Captain Herb was, our local traffic guy. Said but I flew with him Labor Day 1999 in a helicopter. Never been in a helicopter before. Said and I look at, you know, we all have a part to play in what we do. And I thank God every day that I'm able to do what I can as your senator and somebody that knows a little bit about Georgia, but y'all are teaching me a lot more about airports and what's going on. So I just wanted to reflect on, you know, I thank y'all for what you do to make Georgia the success that it is. And I look at this airport, one of the things that, you know, I don't study the Atlanta airport, but I think about, hey, you can get in and out here so much easier and so much faster than you can. If you go to Denver, like you go to Dallas, you gotta once you land, you gotta take a hike somewhere to get where you want to be. You go to Denver and it's 20 miles away from everything. So I'm glad that the people that predated us had the vision to make Atlanta and Georgia and this airport, Hartsfield-Jackson, said what it is. So with that, I'm going to call on Mr. Myrna White, who's the assistant general manager for Atlanta Hartsfield-Jackson. And if at some point today I just call it Hartsfield, remember I grew up in Atlanta. I'm not trying to slight anything with Mayor Jackson. Mayor Jackson and my father were good friends. And unfortunately, both of them were the same size. Now, I'm just going to say that was pretty big.
Absolutely. Well, Chairman, we don't take offense at all. We have executives who still sometimes say Hartsfield. So, good morning to Chairman Ginn, Chairman Jaspers, and to the committee. On behalf of Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms and our Airport General Manager, Ballroom Theodore, I am thrilled to welcome you to Hartsfield-Jackson this morning. I know that you're aware that Hartsfield-Jackson is the busiest and most efficient airport in the world. And thanks to the premier leadership team at Hartsfield-Jackson, our airport is recognized as a pace setter and a leader in aviation among commercial airports around the globe. That status, though, does benefit the entire aviation system for the state. Now, when I think of the phrase, a rising tide lifts all boats, that is a perfect example of how our airport impacts the aviation system here in the state, all across Georgia, commercial and rural. Our economic impact for the state is $66 billion. Now, including the 63,000 employees who work on site, we have a direct impact to employment of 383,000 jobs across our state. Now, because rural Georgia is a part of your focus, that strikes a chord with me. I am from Dublin, Georgia, where most of my family still lives, and my 86-year-old mother raises black Angus cows. Now, you don't get much more rural than that.
That's our number.
And our friend Senator Jeff Mullis likes to tease me about being from the fastest growing city in the state. Now, how is that, you might ask? He says because it's Dublin every day. As a proud University of Georgia graduate whose only child recently graduated there also, I love this state. By the way, no dogs. And as you said, it's so good to see them leading the national polls in football. I was there when Herschel Walker was here, by the way. And now between the dogs and the Braves, we are indeed having a banner here in Georgia. But your work here is especially important to us, and we want you to know how much we appreciate your efforts to make sure that aviation across the state remains excellent, and that this state remains among the best in which to do business. So thank you again for your work and for allowing us to host you today. Thank you. Oh, before that, I want to introduce my good friend. I didn't know if that was my role, but he's coming right up next. He's one of our greatest partners, our largest airline partner at the airport. Jeff David is Vice President for State and Local Government Affairs, and he's just an all-around great guy. So, Jeff is next. Thank you.
Take this one.
Can't beat that intro. I should just leave. Can't do that. I don't. No. So, good morning, everybody. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you for the opportunity to appear before the study committee today. Thank you to everybody on the committee taking time out of your busy schedules to look at such an important issue as airport infrastructure. I know it's important to the entire aviation community and to the entire state of Georgia. As was said, my name is Jeff David. I'm the Vice President of State and Local Government Affairs at Delta Airlines, and I've worked in the aviation industry for the last 17 years. And as I was thinking about my presentation today, I was thinking about one of my favorite quotes I had. It was early in my career. I was sitting in the airport director's office in Fort Dodge, Iowa, and she was as enthusiastic of an aviation director as I've ever met. And she had a sign up in the back of her office that said, "If you build a mile of road, you can travel a mile. If you build a mile of runway, you can travel the world." And at Delta, we're proud to connect Georgia, and we appreciate the work around the globe. And we appreciate the work that the study committee is doing on this important issue, which is important to our customers and your constituents around the state. You know, commercial airports are really one of the best, if not the best, examples of public-private partnerships. We talk about that a lot. Public-private partnerships is the key to success. You don't have to look any farther than our airports, and you really don't have to look any farther than the airport that we're at today. But when you think about it, all the airports that Delta flies to in the United States are owned and operated by public entities. Airports are closed-loop financial models, which means everything that gets generated on that airport, whether it's the landing fees, the terminal leases, the concessions, the parking, whatever happens there, stays on that airport to continue to help it grow and maintain. And together, the public sector and the private sector are working together to create these economic engines for the communities, the regions, and the states that we live in. I know the Department of Aviation, the state of Atlanta has already welcomed you to Hartsfield-Jackson, Atlanta International Airport, the largest and the busiest airport in the world. I know, you know, we have to just throw out 2020 because that was just an odd year across the board in this industry, so we know it's the largest and the busiest. But let me also welcome you into Delta's largest hub in our system of 9 domestic hubs we have in the country. And it's not just our largest hub, but when you look at it, it's double the size of our next largest hub. So if you think about our second largest hub, Atlanta is double that size. So simply put, Delta's network and our system and our operation, it starts here in Atlanta, it starts here in Georgia. Some quick background on Delta's presence in the state of Georgia. Currently, we have more than 34,000 employees in the state of Georgia, making it the largest private employer in the state. We're currently operating about 875 peak day departures in 2021. That will grow in 2022. We'll get into this a little bit later in my comments. We're still building back from the pandemic. We serve over 200 nonstop destinations from Atlanta, including over 50 international destinations located in Europe, Africa, South America, and Asia. And in addition to our hub here in Atlanta, Delta provides daily service to Georgia's regional economic centers, including, I know many of the airport directors are in the audience today, Augusta, Albany, Brunswick, Columbus, Savannah, and Valdosta. The cost effectiveness and efficiency of operating in Georgia and Atlanta have been very beneficial to the region and to the state. Over 60% of the traffic that we serve here in Atlanta for Delta and our hub is connecting traffic. So that's passengers that we bring from around the system into Atlanta, connect them onto a flight here, and send them on their way around the globe. Travelers, we choose Atlanta for those passengers over our other 8 hubs that we could bring them to. Travelers to and from Georgia alone, there's just not a large enough population in the state to be able to handle the size of our operation. As I said before, 875 peak day flights will be and growing. There's not enough population in Georgia and Atlanta to handle that alone. It has to have that mix of connecting traffic. And here it's 60 to 65% of it is connecting traffic that we bring here. And we can do that because it's efficient and it's effective airport to operate at. We greatly appreciate the state of Georgia's focus on making Georgia the best state in which to do business. That philosophy was evident when the state provided an exemption to the state's jet fuel tax back in 2018. And prior to this policy change, Georgia had one of the most uncompetitive jet fuel taxes when looking at hub airport states around the country. The implementation of the tax exemption was having the desired outcome up until the pandemic, when really the airline industry was turned upside down. But just some stats that I looked at, if you look at 18 and 19, and when I say that, I think of our calendar year. That's kind of how Delta looks at it versus the fiscal year. The number of airline seats in Georgia had grown by 5.2%. In raw numbers, that was a 3.2 million seat increase in the state of Georgia in 18 and 19, of which Delta contributed about 2.4 million. Delta's growth in Georgia in that same time period was more than double that of its growth at its other 3 core inland hubs. So when we think about our network, we really think about, this was evident as we built back from the pandemic, we think about the 4 what we call our inland hubs. So it sort of starts with Atlanta, Minneapolis, Detroit, and Salt Lake. And we have hubs on the coast in New York, Boston, Seattle, and LA. But if you look at those 4 inland hubs, we grew here in Georgia in that 2-year period 2.4 million seats. Our growth in Utah was 1.2 million seats. Michigan was 1.1 million, and Minnesota was 600,000. I have to be careful. I had the Minneapolis airport in here earlier this week, so I know the press is here, so we can just keep that in Georgia. That'd be great. Georgia's increase of 3.2 million airline seats meant that air service grew more in Georgia than states that have more population than Georgia. So if you look at it, New York in that time period grew 2.7 million airline seats, Pennsylvania 2.6 million, Illinois 2.5 million, and Ohio 700,000. in Georgia at 3.2 million in that same time period. So it was having the desired effect, as were other policies that were implemented. Atlanta, the Department of Aviation are just great partners with Delta Airlines, and we've worked in a collaborative manner over the years to make Atlanta one of the most efficient airports in the world. It's easy to say that you're good partners in good times. You find out who your true great partners are in really difficult times, which is what we're hopefully coming out of right now. And throughout the COVID pandemic, the state of Georgia and the Department of Aviation, the city of Atlanta, have just been incredible partners for Delta and the airline industry. From day one of this pandemic, we've worked together with the state, with the airport, to navigate through simply uncharted waters that we've never seen before. Like the rest of the state, the country, the world, the COVID pandemic has presented a challenge like nothing we have ever seen in the aviation industry. And that's really saying a lot, because this is an industry that has survived the tragedies of 9/11, SARS, bankruptcies, the Great Recession, and many, many other challenges. We thought we'd seen it all. We truly thought we'd seen it all. But I can tell you that the airline industry, for the airline industry, the COVID pandemic has been those challenges added together and on steroids. It's like nothing we've ever seen. So the impact was remarkable to Delta. At the lowest point in April of 2020, Delta's revenues and passenger counts were down 95%, and it was like overnight. People just stopped traveling on March 13th, March 14th. We saw as soon as the borders closed, that was the end of their travel. For weeks, we actually had more cancellations in our airline than we had new bookings, and that was the first time in the history of the company that had ever happened. On normal days pre-pandemic, we would have nearly 500,000 customers traveling around the world on a daily basis. There were days in April of 2020, we had fewer than 20,000. 500,000 on a normal day, under 20,000 in April of 2020. We grounded 2/3 of our fleet, which is about 600 aircraft. We closed terminals, sky clubs, gates. Over half of our workforce, 40,000 employees, took voluntary unpaid leaves. This is the Delta difference. This is the Delta spirit. Our employees looked at what was going on in the airline and said, we understand our company needs help. Half of our workforce said, I will raise my hand and voluntarily take an unpaid leave of 30, 60, 90 days. They kept their benefits, they kept their travel benefits, but they said, I get it, I know what's going on, I'm here to help. That's amazing, 40,000 people. In 2020, Delta lost $12 billion that year. Just a year, 12 months after us making a profit of $6 billion in 2019. That was the flip. So, that's the bad news. The good news is, although choppy, we're starting to see the industry and Delta is starting to recover from the pandemic. Travel is rebounding faster than we thought, which is great. Domestic travel has recovered quicker than international, but the good news is international travel is starting to improve as more and more countries are opening the borders. We're excited for and ready to play a role in uniting families and friends this holiday season around the world beginning November 8th, when the U.S. lifts the travel restrictions on vaccinated foreign nationals for the first time in more than 19 months. With the increase in travel demand, Delta's hiring, which is great to see, especially in our home state right here in Georgia. We've hired more than 2,000 Georgians in the first half of 2021, and that number will continue to grow through the end of the year and into 2022. So where are we hiring? We're hiring everywhere in our system. 1,300 reservation specialists have been hired this fall, so that's our customer engagement, if you call the 1-800 number. Over 3,000 airport customer service workers, so that's our workers at the airports around the system. We have 1,600 tech-op positions that we're filling, 1,000 of those tech-op jobs right here in Georgia, and we're working with the technical college system, and where they have the aviation maintenance program curriculum. There was a hearing on that earlier this year to talk about that. We're working with them, basically giving them the curriculum, saying if you can find the students and you can train with this curriculum, they will have jobs at Delta when they graduate. We're hiring about 1,000 pilots, which is about 200 to 400 per month, using a lot of different resources to do that. One that I want to highlight is our Propel Program, which is at Middle Georgia State, which is kind of a new system for us, but it's getting kids who are aviation majors in college, interviewing them as sophomores and juniors, and if they get a job offer from Delta, that is a guarantee that within 5 years of graduating, they'll have a spot at Delta. They'll either spend the next 5 years at a regional carrier, in the military, flying private, but they have a job opportunity at Delta 5 years down the line, which is really important not only for the kids, but for their parents to know, to let them go into the aviation major, because sometimes the parents don't really know what that future will hold for them. And in addition to the pilots, we're hiring 3,000 flight attendants to fill our system. So we're growing again, and we're hiring. Although the 20 months during the COVID pandemic have been the most difficult in our history, we've remained committed to investing in infrastructure, which I know is what this committee is really interested in looking at. Investing in infrastructure at our hub airports around the country. This includes investing more than $12 billion in airport projects that modernize our hub infrastructure and customer experience. And it includes being able to expedite our new terminal out at LAX, so that will be opening next year. During the pandemic, we were able to push that project forward by 18 months. We've accelerated construction of the new terminal at LaGuardia, $3.9 billion project. That should open in 2025. We've opened a new airport in Salt Lake City with a brand new terminal opened earlier this year. That got done a full year ahead of schedule. And we have a new international arrival facility, which is called an FIS in Seattle, that should be opening in the next 4 or 5 months to make that a better experience. So we're doing a lot of things around the country, but more importantly, we're doing a lot right here in Georgia. So you heard the numbers I said before. Again, our investment here in Atlanta is more than we're doing around the rest of the country. When we renewed our lease with the city of Atlanta and Atlanta Airport in 2016, we committed to a $6 billion master plan that provides for investments in operational customer experience improvements at the Atlanta Airport. And we've already seen many of those improvements constructed, including we've modernized 85 gates on the T, A, B, and C concourses, the corridors and the center points in those concourses as well. We've helped add those canopies that you now don't get wet when you're arriving or getting dropped off, and most importantly, the brand new pedestrian walkways that have just opened up if you haven't been there yet. From the parking lots now that you can cross over the top of those, which will help traffic flow on the arrival level. We built a new domestic security checkpoint on the south side. If you haven't been there yet, go use that. It's where the TSA pre-check is now, but it's just adding great capacity. And there's many, many more investments to come in the future for that $6 billion number, which I think we all anticipate over the lifespan of the lease will continue to grow in scope. These investments highlight how commercial airport funding works. Basically, the users that use the airports are paying for the operating and capital expenditures at the airport. So in Atlanta, and that's the Department of Aviation to check me on the numbers, but it's about a $425 million a year budget just in the operating side. And there are cost centers that get contributed to whatever the users are using. So for us, we pay landing fees that pays for the cost on the airfield. We do rents and leases and rents and charges for our terminal areas and the spaces that we use in the terminal that go to cover our terminal costs. The police and the fire operations, the customer service, the maintenance, and the plane training, and many more. That all goes into a fund that then the users of the airport are covering. And I know we have the airport directors from other airports, but my understanding from the regional ones that we serve as well, it's a very similar concept that, we pay a fee when we fly in, we rent our space, we rent our gates, and that's how we help pay for the operations that we're using at the commercial airports. So with that, I just want to thank you again for the opportunity to present today. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
I do have questions. I appreciate your time, and I'm sorry we didn't ask questions from you guys, but first I just want to go back and say, for a lot of people in the room, from the commercial aviator side, I'm a user of Hartsfield, and it's hard to explain this to you guys, for anyone who hasn't ever flown, but Atlanta is literally the gold standard. Not like, oh, I love my hometown Braves, they're the best in the world. Hartsfield is the best in the world, and it's our controllers coming in. You can talk to any aviator out there. We'd much rather fly in Atlanta than, Charlotte or Dallas or Dulles, it's amazing how much better the controllers are. And then on the ground, it was almost eerie because we would joke during the pandemic, you'd land at Charlotte and you'd get to the gate in like 5 minutes and it was super efficient. And we're like, man, this pandemic has made Charlotte as good as Atlanta. Right? The only difference was they needed the pandemic to do it. Atlanta does that all the time. That's how good they are. So I just wanted to give props to Hartsfield. It's hard to understand from a user perspective. Nobody better. For you guys specifically, Delta, I'm curious if you, just two real quick questions. One, you talked about the user numbers. Are you including in your numbers your co-share partners and your wholly owns like Republic and SkyWest and your total growth of seats?
Yes, that would be our partners as well.
Okay, yeah. And then are you guys planning on, I was reading about some 330 per purchases, and I'm hoping that means you're planning on a major move towards international. I'm assuming that's largely going to come out of Parksville.
Yeah, no, so great questions. You know, like I said before, the international piece of the recovery has really been slow. And it's gonna be the last piece that comes back. So if you think about the Delta mix of passengers, it's really three parts. It's leisure, leisure, business, international, right? The leisure and the domestic have come back extremely fast. The good news is we're starting to see business travel rebound. It's not nearly to the levels of 2019 yet. And then the international piece was really the last piece, and that was really dictated by borders being closed. You know, it was a fascinating summer. We put, whenever a country opened, we put services. So, you know, a great example is we hadn't done Atlanta to Athens, Greece, I think over a decade. But Greece was, I think, the second country in Europe to open up to vaccinated travelers. And as soon as it opened, we put in Atlanta, Athens service. And it was great. It was because people just wanted to travel and they needed to go where they could get to. So you'll continue to see international grow, and where that grows, Atlanta is at the top of the list of where we want to put that service.
It's not anything we can help with, but are you guys anticipating any scope clause issues as you grow back that international?
I don't think so. No, I think it's, we've got a good plan going forward. We will be ready when the demand is there and the countries are open. Last year we put, you were talking about some of the aircraft, we were putting A330s, I was just talking to our network people, so we were putting A330s and 767s, things that we would normally fly internationally. We were putting them on routes, from the north to the south because people wanted to get out of Minnesota and Michigan and they want to go somewhere warm. And so we had A330s on a Minneapolis-Phoenix flight or a Minneapolis-Fort Myers flight. Those are planes that should be flying internationally. There just wasn't anywhere to go. As soon as we can go there again and the demand's there, we'll get back to that.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Somewhat of a nebulous question a little bit. I know, Hartsfield, Jackson Airport is the star of Georgia in a sense and brings a lot of business to our state and actually to the southeast, to the south and so forth. There are other commercial airports in Georgia that feed into this airport. How does Delta value general aviation airports in the state? Because this committee is looking at infrastructure for 102 airports, and not just 1 or 9, but a lot. So how does Delta value the GA airports?
Yeah, they're important parts. So we look at this as an overarching aviation community, aviation system. Everybody has to play their role, and there's a place for all components of it. So we certainly value the role that they play in it. Some of our best customers also have a general aviation component with it as well. I think, for us, as we look at general aviation airports, it's usually around our hub airports or the commercial airports that we are looking at. So for us, it's the idea of trying to keep GA traffic off of the commercial airports, and so it's which GA airports then support those efforts. So that's usually, as we're thinking through GA, we're thinking about, there is value for everybody of keeping GA traffic off of Hartsfield. So what's the reliever airport that helps there? And that's something we look at, not just in Georgia, but around the country as well.
Right. And then I would say that other GA airports, because you're looking for mechanics and pilots and so forth, and that's where they're developed. That's their farm system.
Yeah.
Isn't that
It's true. We saw that at the committee meeting earlier this year. There was, we testified, but there were also representatives from general aviation airports. And we were comparing notes and talking about how they recruit and how we recruit and what they look for and what we look for and where is there synergy as well. So it's an important part of the development process.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Larry, for those questions.
I think it'd help if y'all said where you're from,
Okay, sure.
so they would know kind of generally there.
I'm Robert Burr. I'm from Brunswick and St. Simons Island, but also with the Georgia Airports Association, representing all the airports in Georgia, all the different levels of airports in Georgia. You hit in your presentation, you hit upon those very important aspects from commercial to corporate to training airports, and that's what we're interested in, the entire state of Georgia. And you're a tremendous player in that, and as far as your commercial, definitely commercial, but also the component of the airports that's basically linked into you by regional service. Regional airports are a little bit nervous about where that's going based on the equipment availability and the commitment of airlines. Now, Delta has always shown a strong commitment to Georgia airports. We thank you for that. Any plans in the future where we're going with that as far as regional service, as far as equipment and service?
So I appreciate the question. So I worked at the airline in 2010 when the Saab 340 aircraft, which was a 34-seat turboprop aircraft, got retired out of the fleet. And that became the big question, because that's how we had served regional airports with Florida. So the big question was, what's going to happen with the regional centers? And so then we developed it with the 50-seat regional jets. And so that's been and then most of the communities are really happy because they wanted, the jet service was a huge improvement from a customer experience standpoint, from a reliability standpoint. So as you said, we've always been committed to it. Actually, right before the pandemic, we had announced increased service to the regional markets in Georgia. We were going to add a flight a day basically to the list that I had set on top of what we were already doing because we had the capacity to do it. We announced it, I think in December or late November of 2019, and it was supposed to start in the spring of 2020, and obviously, that didn't occur. So, we are certainly stayed committed to it. That aircraft is in our fleet. We've got 3 regional carriers that we now work with: Endeavor, SkyWest, Republic are the 3 that are part of the Delta Connection project. So it's still a big part of our fleet and our system in Georgia, around the country as well. Forward markets.
Yeah, we're looking forward to see the type of equipment down the road is a question mark. I don't know if you have any foresight on that. What advice would you give this committee as far as supporting the entire Georgia airport system?
Yeah, I think, listen, it is a system based, right? So it's important that the entire system has the support that it's needed. I think you're doing the right things, right? You're starting with a cost needs assessment, figuring out what is actually needed around the system. How many airports should there be in the state? What purposes do they all serve? And this is what we've seen. We've worked on this in a lot in other states around the country. So this is usually the sort of the start. Is you put a plan together and say, here's the needs. These are the types of airports that we have. These are the ones that we need, and then the needs in the system. And you try to figure out how to best provide the services to that. I think from a Delta perspective, we certainly are parts of the system, and we know that we're important parts of the system, and we look at it from the system as a whole, and want to be supportive of that.
If I might, said I'm gonna back up the clock a little bit, kind of help walk me through this, but, as a kid, I watched too many Jacques Cousteau movies and stuff. You watch the whale going down the thing, and there'd be a bunch of little fishes from a long time. You gotta remember, most of what we see in airports in Georgia are those little fishes that are swimming alongside the whale, said the Hartsfield Jackson. And for me, it's tough to come up with, okay, how do we fund them? What are we gonna do? When I first got in the legislature, said the Delta was going through some extreme financial difficulty, went through bankruptcy. Said I look at, okay, hey, glad to see your partner helped you in that point. And clearly, said they, and I don't want to belabor the point, but it's been the intent of the legislature, said they, to get that jet fuel tax back in there. But I know, okay, that's not happening without a lot of help and a lot of support. And when I look at it, biggest supplier or biggest purchaser of jet fuel in the state would be Delta. Said they, so you'd be the one that's carrying that young's work there. For me, a couple things. One of them is when I look at what can we do as far as the legislature and the state to make Delta more profitable. Said we want to try to, you're a partner. If it doesn't make sense for y'all, then we got to look at that. At the same token, all those other little airports and things that are swimming alongside of you, they don't exist without some help from us. And so for me, I want you to try to, help me walk through that. What do we do to do the funding for whether it's a general aviation or whether it's one of your partners around the state with the regional airport? What would your vision of that be?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I'll just say, we don't have to sort of come up with something new because we see it around the country, right? So North Carolina doesn't have a jet fuel tax, and they support their airports through general fund contributions through the transportation system. Texas doesn't have a jet fuel tax. They have a number of airports as well. They support their system. There are a number of airports. Florida has just reduced theirs from, I think it was 7 cents a gallon all the way down to 1, and they may even go lower. They support their airports through the general fund. There are many, many ways that states are supporting their airports and their infrastructure airports in other states to see how they're doing it, to bring ideas to the table. But I think the idea that it just has to be, the jet fuel tax is the only way to fund airports is just not consistent with necessarily what we see around the country. There's a lot of different user fees you can put in place. There's a lot of different mechanisms. I think, if there's a silver lining of the pandemic, and I know we've all found different ones, there's a lot of federal dollars coming from an infrastructure standpoint, whether it's been through the CARES Act or whether it's through the bipartisan infrastructure bill that hopefully passes one of these days in DC. There's a lot of money coming from airports that I think states will be able to use for the entire aviation system. And so I think, we're happy to be sitting at the table with you all and rolling up our sleeves and showing you what we see, or trying to take examples of what's worked in other states to find a solution that works for everybody in Georgia.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, again, a little bit of my last question. So, kind of to piggyback on the chairman's question, and kind of for the other people in the room, aviation, we're seeing a huge hit across the board to people pursuing their private pilot's license, building commercial pilots, building, the mechanic side is slowing down, and you mentioned some of the efforts you're taking there. And kind of education, this, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that I am. When it comes to pilot acquisition and the acquisition of the talent management, Delta's at the top of the list. So, Delta doesn't have a recruiting problem, right? There's a huge pilot shortage right now. There's not for Delta because they've got 10,000 active applications, right? Because they're at the top of the list. And so my plea to you guys is a lot of the other airlines are having to cultivate talent at the bottom. You're blessed that you're in a position where you can let them cultivate talent for you, and then you can take that talent because you're the destination career airline, which is a great thing. My question to you though is, how does Delta come along and partner with us as a state to help solve some of those problems in a way that both benefits Delta and also benefits the state of Georgia? I would like to see more pilot programs, more RTP type programs. Delta's the only major airline that doesn't have an RTP program to bring military rotor pilots into the commercial airline industry. They're the only one that I know of. And more of those things happen. I'd like to see more of those things happen, and I'd love to see more partnerships with these local communities and these local airports that is a pathway to Delta, but a more significant one, because again, as we invest in Delta, we appreciate your market advantage. And so I know this is a discussion that really should be had with your chief operating officer and executive officer. And I'm not saying that you should not take advantage of that market advantage, but I would like to see a little bit of an effort to solve the greater state, to make Georgia a more focused point of Delta's, top to bottom strategy, whether it's recruiting for Denver, and does that make
No, it makes total
comment make
sense. So from a workforce development standpoint, we're all in. So I think we had a 3-hour hearing with the higher ed committee earlier this year, talking about what we're doing, but more importantly, what else can we do? We would like to when we hire, the vast majority of people we're hiring are in Georgia, or to be based in Georgia. We would like to hire all Georgians to fill those spots. And I use Tech Ops as the best example. We know we need to hire 1,000 technicians in the next year. They just don't exist in Georgia. Based on everything we've tried to do, which is work with the technical schools, get the curriculum in place, get people recruited, go to the middle schools and the high schools to get people interested. There's just not enough to hire everybody here. So we're going to have to look around the country. Same thing on the pilot piece. But if we would rather just hire in Georgia for Georgia. So if there's opportunities out there, partnerships we can develop, we have an entire team within Delta that's looking at this in all of our divisions, whether it's flight ops, whether it's tech ops, whether it's in flight and on the headquarters as well. So if we're missing things that we should be doing, I would love to have that conversation, but we are 100% engaged on it, and that's our goal as well, is for the people we need to hire in Georgia, we want to hire Georgia to work with. So it's great to know. And I'm not sure, love to follow more on the program, the military program you're talking about. I do know we recruit actively with the military. Many of our pilots have military background, but if there's a specific one we're missing, I'd love to follow on that.
Sure. Yeah, and the specifics we can talk later, but it's just, I'm talking about, the big picture is, you got a guy that's at Delta, it's about 10 years in his career before he finally gets there. And then you look back and you realize what he did is, he got his ATP in Florida, ATP flight school in Texas, then he went to the regional in Minneapolis or Charlotte, and then he gets to Delta. I want to see that brought, you know, I want someone to go cradle to grave in Georgia in their aviation career. And with the partners in this room, that's completely doable in a cost-efficient, beneficial way, not a way, you know, I'm not asking you to sacrifice intelligent business practices for the state, but I think there's a compromise.
I just have a comment.
Ms. Bain.
And Jeff mentioned the federal grants that have come out as part of COVID, the CARES Act, the CRISA, and the third. It was a very small amount that the smaller airports in the state got. There are some airports grant went $12,000, and very minuscule, small amount. But what it did do is put a burden on our GDOT project managers. So as they would normally be administering on regular day-to-day projects, they then had to administer the federal projects for really a small amount of money. So it was good. Yes, we got some, but I don't know if we get the bang for the buck.
So you already spent it all?
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Unlucky.
One day.
I just
I'd
got-
like to take you up on your offer. You said you do some homework for us in terms of what other states do for mechanisms for funding for the airports, all the airports in the state. And if you've got some means to do that, that'd be great.
Yeah, that would help, so that's what my comment was. And Representative Singleton, I just want to tell you, in the Chairman David Knight's higher ed appropriations, we have really dug into training and education. And I think you'll see Chairman Knight moving on a few ideas this coming session, but y'all have been great partners, and y'all have the power to be a great partner. And that's what, you know, we really need that at Atlanta Tech and some others, and we appreciate what you've done there. But we got to move on.
Thank you very
I
much.
think, and so, thank you, thank both of y'all very much. Give my hand.
Our next speaker is Billy Reagan, who's with Vidalia Airport. Glad to have you here, Billy. You know, I'm not landing in the Vidalia Airport, but I did fly over the helicopter with the DNR and I thought it was planting season for all the onions.
Right.
It's pretty interesting to see.
We are, onions will be planted in December, harvest in April. We're clear. All right, I just want to start by saying thank you for having me speak today. I'm going to kind of speak on the small airport side of things. I'm a small airport, got about 12,000 people in my town, so we're a little smaller airport. I just want to start a little bit about myself. My name is Billy Reagan. I am the airport manager at Vidalia Regional Airport. I've been employed with the city of Vidalia since August of 2010. Started as a line service supervisor, cutting the grass, cleaning the toilets, still do those things. Then I moved up to line service supervisor, moved up to interim airport manager, and in January of this year, I moved to full-time airport manager. I am a private pilot. I've got about 700 hours. And the two aircraft you see on the slide here are Cessna 172 and the Cherokee Warrior. You know, they're old bangers. They get the job done. So I understand aviation and pilots. Just a little bit about my staff. I am a smaller airport. There are 2 full-time employees, myself, and I have Hunter Hill, the line service attendant. I have 1 part-time employee. We're open 7 days a week, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., closed on Thanksgiving and Christmas. And we are available for after-hours service, you know, as needed by our customers. So just a little bit about my airport. Where did the Vidalia Regional Airport come from? We began our life on August 12, 1940, and we were requisitioned by the U.S. Army in 1943 during World War II. We were used as a training airport for B-17s and B-24s, and it was declared surplus and turned over to the city of Vidalia in 1946. We cover an area of about 1,245 acres. We're 275 feet above sea level, and we have 2 runways. Runway 257 and runway 3214, with runway 257 being our longest at 6,003 feet long, 100 feet wide. It's also the runway we have our GPS ILS approaches to. The airport is home to 29 aircraft. We have 1 twin-engine turboprop Hangar 350. The majority of my aircraft are single-seaters, your Cherokee 140s, your Cessna 150s. We got a couple of guys that are building a half-scale model of an F-4U Corsair and other experimental home-built aircraft. Some of my transient customers. Who do I serve day-to-day business? Some of my transient customers are Sikorsky, You know, they make those helicopters down in Florida, fly them to South Carolina for storage, and they take them back to Florida to finish outfitting them for the U.S. Army, whatever customer bought them, they stop at me for fuel. I support the Georgia State Patrol, the Georgia Forestry Commission, and we support all branches of the United States Armed Forces. Coast Guard, Air Force, Army, we support them all. We're a big believer in supporting armed forces. So who are some of my base customers? Who support me day to day? Some of my base customers are large builders. They make the backyard storage sheds you see. Gay Oil Company, Airvac Lifton, which I'm sure we're all familiar with, and Air America Aviation Services. They provide the aircraft rental and flight training on the field. So, some industries that are supported by my airport. Who do we support? We support Dot Foods. We support Southern Company, who has an office here in Atlanta. Chicken at the Sea. The Hoopy Match Club, which I'll get in more to in a minute. Train, air conditioner people. Centos and FPL Foods. They are a cattle farming business in Tappan County, the next county over from mine. We sit in Jacksonville Center's airspace, which covers an area of about 210,000 square miles. At the tip of my arrow is kind of where we are. We're kind of in that zone of radar and radio kind of, You go north of me, you're in Atlanta's airspace. So we're kind of in that zone of in between. Vidalia Regional Airport, we are a Class 3 general aviation airport, with Class 3 being the highest in the state of Georgia. Some features of the Level 3 airport include a runway of 5,500 feet or longer, 100-foot width, full-length parallel taxiway, lighted airfield signage, hangars for 70% of our base aircraft fleet, the weather information system, AWAS, the approach lighting system, and pilot-controlled lights. When I say pilot-controlled lights, you do push a little push-to-talk button on the aircraft control yoke, and that controls the lights up and down at night. To give you an example of what a Level 2 and a Level 1 airport are, a Level 1 airport is considered the minimum with your basic services. A Level 2 airport is considered business airports of local impact. A Level 3 airport is considered a business airport with regional impacts. So Level 3 is your air carrier airports and your general aviation airports of regional significance. Your Level 2 airport is a business airport of local significance, capable of accommodating all business and personal single-use and twin-engine general aviation aircraft. Your Level 1 airport represents the minimum to which airports in the system are expected to develop. Your Level 1 airport should accommodate all your smaller aircraft. In Georgia, 92% of the airports are in the NIPIS, which is the National Plan of Integrated Airport Systems. I had to look that one up. With 80% having a runway of 5,000 feet or longer. You know, another interesting fact thrown there, in Georgia, my airport is classified as a regional airport. And if you in the NIPIS, I'm classified as a local basic airport. The Vidalia Regional Airport, we sit in the district of Senator Blake Tillery, who is also a pilot, and Representative Lisa Hagan. I would note that Senator Tillery is a pilot and calls Vidalia his home airfield. And I did have the privilege of flying him to his check ride the day he passed his check ride. We've also been visited by Senator Harper, and I welcome all of you to come and see what's going on in my airport. We got a lot going on for us. Over the years, I've hosted the Blue Angel, which they'll be there again next year, Tora, Canadian Snowbirds, and countless other air show acts. We've hosted the Marines from Beaufort, South Carolina on a deployment exercise. And we've hosted F-18s and Ospreys and all manner of military aircraft we host.
Billy, before you leave that slide, can I ask, if the Level 2, if you had the 5,000-foot runway, you had avgas and jet fuel, that basically what you need to have in a Level 2, or is there something else I'm missing?
Level 2 airport, you need to have some approaches. It should be aided by a non-instrument approach, like your RNAVs or your GPSs. You know, Level 2 airports, you can get some of your bigger jets in there, like your Gulfstreams and your Globals, but it's my experience what they're looking for is, they're looking for that Level 3 with the ILS, the precision, and they're looking for the longer runway to get in there.
Thank you.
All right, just some system needs versus benefits. The estimated annual planning system needs for Georgia airports is $411 million. And this was as of the last economic study. The estimated state federal funds available is 63.7, but if you look at the economic impact, Georgia airports have a $6.9 billion. It'd be nice to see some additional return on the funds based on our economic impact and how we help the state of Georgia move forward. Uh-oh, I hit a button. Okay. Okay, so just some information about the Vidalia Regional Airport based on our most recent economic study. We have average annual visitors of 9,437. Supported employment is 44 people. Annual payroll because of the airport is $1,286,000. Annual spending because of the airport is $3,224,900. Annual economic impact is $4.5 million. And the airport supported annual state and local sales income tax is $165,330. Some of the top 5 destinations from Vidalia are Birmingham, Alabama, Gainesville, Georgia, Augusta, Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia, and Farmingdale, New York. You may ask why Farmingdale, New York. I'll get into that here in the next slide. At the Vidalia Regional Airport, one of my big business booms has been the Hoopie Match Club. The Hoopie Match Club is a private golf retreat about 10 miles to the east of me in a little small town called Cobbtown, Georgia. Cobbtown can fit inside the airport fence here at Hartsville. It's a very small airport. I hear some chuckles, so I know some of you know where it is. Because of the club, my fuel sales are up 65 to 70%, and I expect to top $650,000 jet fuel sales this year, which is huge for an airport my size. And you'll see in these pictures why. Just to kind of give you a comparison of where my fuel sales are since the golf club opened. In 2017, I sold 53,137 gallons of fuel for $205,177.79. So far, year to date in 2021, I sold 145,943 gallons of fuel for $553,753.06. So in the 4 or 5 years since the club is open, my fuel sales have gone through the roof. 65 to 70%. You know, and I will note 2021 is year to date, and while I've been here in Atlanta, my co-worker Hunter, he's back at the airfield just pummeling away, just going as hard as he can. But this is a picture, I want to kind of show you what the golf club has done for my ramp. As you'll see, this is my ramp here. I've got 2 aircraft over in the helipad area. I've got 3 stacked across the front, and I even closed the taxiway to make room. And I show you this, the need for infrastructure, more ramp space. Where do we put all these aircraft that are growing? I'm seeing the Gulfstream 650 ERs, Global Expresses, all your legacy 650s. I have a couple of CRJs come in that have been transformed. So I'm seeing the need for expansion. This is just another couple of pictures here kind of showing you my ramp and where we're going. You know, right now I'm undergoing a ramp project, so I've closed my secondary crosswind runway, and I'm parking on the runway. Last week I had 13 jets out there. You know, we've seen such aircraft as Under Armour aircraft. We've seen Patron executives. We've seen Chipotle. People from all over the country are coming into my airfield.
To play golf.
To play golf. There's a private golf, it's called Cobbtown, Georgia. It's about this big. To play golf.
I know a bunch of kick fighters out there.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so the question is at one of our meetings, we had somebody testify that the economic development project, they had to clear the golf course so they could land a plane from the economic development benefit. But in this case, the golf course is driving the economic development of
The golf
airport.
course is driving economic development of Vidalia Regional Airport. You know, in years past, you know, we're city owned and operated. In years past, we would depend on city funds in the year to kind of tide me over budget-wise. With this golf course and the economic developments driving my airport, you know, we're having a surplus of unheard amounts. And due to this great increase in business you see, here's another picture. I've got them stacked everywhere. You know, they're stacked as tight as I can stack them. It's kind of a first in, first out policy. We started on a ramp expansion, the ramp rehab. The increase in our traffic drove us to reinforce our ramp. Our old ramp was asphalt. The new ramp is concrete, 10 inches of concrete on top of 12 inches of rock for the 95,000 pound aircraft I'm seeing. And I will say, the funds for this ramp project are thanks to my good friend Senator Tiller. He was the one that was key in helping us get this space, to get this money. You'll see here, we expect to finish this project hopefully Monday, I think, if the weather holds. They're going to do the striping for me, put my tie downs in. Just another project here. Okay, and we plan in the near future. We were just awarded $2.2 million from the FAA for a runway 257 slab rehab project. You know, that's needed with our bigger aircraft. We need to be proactive and keep our infrastructure performing at the level that my business customers expect me to perform at. All right, and according to the latest General Statewide Aviation System Plan, which was done in 2017, I checked with my rep, Lynn Thompson, on this. Business aviation is currently one of the fastest growing segments of general aviation. A healthy economy is supporting growth in corporate aviation. Those businesses based in Georgia and those from outside our state, you know, in my case, I have Southern Company flies from Birmingham, Alabama a couple times a week. I have the cattle people from South Carolina flying. I have the people that own the onion farm from Miami. They're flying in and they're using our system, leading to increased activity and the need for more infrastructure to support it. Based on the latest data from the study, the number of based aircraft operations are expected to increase steadily through 2035. And the numbers I'm going to reference now are based on this study was done in 2017. The current number of based aircraft totals 4,852, with projected based aircraft of 5,372. The current operations are about 1.5 million and expected to increase to 1.7 million. Over this forecasted period, statewide based aircraft are expected to grow at 0.54%, with the general aviation operations expected to grow at 0.54% as well. So what is the Vidalia Regional Airport doing? What proactive steps are we taking? Well, we recently acquired an ARF truck, and we're going to be sending 4 of our firefighters to ARF school in Savannah in December. So we're taking the steps to move forward to support our customers. You know, the airport is often the first impression businesses get when they come to your city, whether it's Hartsfield or whether it's St. Simon's where Robert is, or whether it's Vidalia where I am. You want your airport to be able to support the businesses coming in. Because oftentimes, if a company can't get their aircraft in there, they're going to move their business to another town that can support them. Now, therefore, what can be done to help smaller airports? You know, currently the state funding is 75-25. You know, and I've been very fortunate. The city of Vidalia, we've been able to pony up our 25% on every project that's come our way. Some towns might not be able to afford the 75-25 split. Now, perhaps consider having some type of grant program, some other program where states can apply for assistance to help lower that 25%. You know, because in some cases, not being able to get the ramp done or the runway done or whatever their project is, that can mean the difference in businesses going to St. Simon's, going to Statesboro, going to, you know, Athens. So ways to keep the money in there. You know, and this is going to be unpopular. My good friend here from Delta, adding that jet fuel tax back in. Adding a couple penny sales tax on the fuel sales, and when it's collected and turned in, put it in a fund the airport's going to apply to. Kind of like a trust fund, if you will. You know, in Georgia, if we want to remain the #1 state to do business, as Governor Kemp has said, and as you all said, then we've got to be forward thinking. Are there areas that are underserved by aviation? Of course. You know, how do we serve those areas and bring them up? You know, building new airports. There have been, in the past 2 years, and correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, I got this from Mitch Ellery. He says there have been 2 airports built in the last 47 years, Upson County in 1994, and most recently Paulding County Airport, our good friends to the north. You know, I wish I could give you all the magic answer. How do we increase funding? How do we do it? Well, we've got to make sure our infrastructure is ready to handle increasing demand on the state aviation system. You know, so what airports like me need? I need more hangars. And this is across the board. All of my hangars are full. I've got people that are tying down the ramp. You know, I've got a couple large corporate aircraft that want to come to my airport. I need more hangars. Ramp, I need a ramp extension. We hope to get that soon. More ramp space. And the infrastructure to attract businesses. Whether it means putting in a road, building them a hangar, taxiway, just the infrastructure to support getting those businesses to your airports.
Billy, I'm gonna interrupt here. I'm handicapped, and I look over at Kathleen Bowen and some of my friends in the local government arena. I'm a recovering local government manager. Said for 20 years, I managed 2 cities in 1 county. I think people need to understand, you get a corporate aircraft into your thing that it says, hey, I'm gonna base my aircraft in your county. What's the math look like? Pick any of those jets. Said what are they paying in property taxes in Vidalia or wherever? Said what are we talking about? Give me the math that as you understand it.
I'll be honest with you, I haven't done the math on that, but one of the benefits to being able to attract those businesses and get that corporate aircraft, your ad valorem taxes, your hangar rent, your fuel sales. And I'll have to get back to you on that because I did not do the math or expect that question. But I can only imagine it'd be a benefit across the board.
Well, I'm going to give you a little bit of hint then.
Okay.
Let's just say it's $1 million aircraft. Some of those that I saw a picture, $1 million won't touch it. 40% assessment, that gets you to $400,000. They're paying taxes on $400,000. They're paying you probably, if you took your millage rate, Kathleen, take a stab at it. Said at a minimum $4,000 a year. Said in there maybe 40,000. Which one is it?
Math's not my best.
Okay.
4. 4,000. 4.
Okay, so they're paying $4,000. My question is the, I'm trying to do this in my head, I apologize. Shouldn't do math in my head. So my problem is that when I look at, you say, hey, I need more hangar space.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they're gonna pay you rent for that hangar. They're gonna pay you your property taxes for doing it. If they're based in your airport, they're gonna pay for the jet fuel. They're gonna buy more because they're based at your location than somewhere else. So I hear a lot of this, and I want to try. Hey, reason we're doing this, we want to help our general aviation airports. But sometimes you got to look at it, and I'm just gonna, my mom named me Frank. I'm gonna tell you the obvious. Said you got to make sure that they're willing to understand. They got to make an investment to come back to us and say, hey, we're gonna do the 75-25 split. That's not a problem. I want to make sure that our local governments are understanding this ain't a gravy train. We didn't win the lottery, but we will want to try to help grow general aviation. But there's a partnership there. So I'll be painful in that pointing that out to some of our folks that.
No, you have to be willing to partner with the businesses and bring them into town. Exactly.
I see Carol and Josh said kind of smiling because they understand, there's only so much DOT money that we got.
And I'd just like to add, speaking of Vidalia, good local partnership that you guys had a number of years ago when we extended the runway to 1,000 feet is Georgia Power, tremendous user of your facility. And they actually provided the local maps, the 25% to put your ILS in.
I failed to remember that, yes. Years and years ago, when we ran the runway out, and they provided a 25% match. I forgot. That was before my time. Thank you for that note there, Carol, yes.
All these other GA people, they're really jealous of you right now, actually.
They are. I don't mean to boast and crawl it, but people are jealous, but it's partnerships. We have to work with our local business partners to help them help us. Right? My good friend Senator Tiller, he says, "Don't come to me asking for money. Come to me with a solution to help me help you find the money, or help me help you get what you need."
I've got a comment real quick.
Okay.
And I didn't introduce myself before. I'm Hope Macaroons. I'm the airport manager at Atlanta Regional Airport, Fountainville, Peachtree City. Not every airport gets that local funding as far as at home. My airport, for instance, is owned and operated by the airport authority. We receive 0 funding from the county or the city. So any projects that we do, we fund ourselves, and that's on the backs of our users, from our hangar customers to our fuel sales. So not everybody has that benefit in the general aviation world in the state.
All right, so, we've touched all of these points. Maybe consider working with a 25% match. How do we capitalize on the economic development we as airports generate for the state economy? Going back to new airports, maybe. New airports being built. Maybe instituting an extra few penny sales tax on jet fuel sales. And going back to the program years ago, my airport was included, the One Georgia program, where we got our runway system. Got the eye listed. There are lots of ideas out there on how do we capitalize on making our airports greater to do business in the future and continue the growth of aviation in the state of Georgia. That's kind of what I had to say. Any questions? Yes, that's what I said. I'll end with, we're having an air show next year. I invite you all to come down and see our air show. April 23rd, 24th, 2022. We've got the Blue Angels coming. Team Air Schiller, T6 Texan formation team. Scott Francis, come down for a weekend of aviation and fun as guests of the airport.
Thank you much, Billy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think next on our agenda is Brian German, he's a Georgia Tech guy. Now, what is Brian, okay, so one of those things,
Well, I'm a Georgia boy at heart, and so I root for UGA too. Don't tell my colleagues at Georgia Tech.
good for you.
I'm happy when anybody in Georgia wins. Chairman Ginn, Chairman Dispersey, thank you so much for inviting me today to talk to your committee. It's a real pleasure to be here and talk about sort of the future of aviation with respect to electric propulsion for aircraft, with respect to new themes that are coming about for aviation, local and regional, and how we might prepare in terms of infrastructure here in Georgia. So I have some slides. How would I set those up?
I thought we were doing good with electric cars, and we're gonna get to electric planes. I don't think my cord is that long.
Well, that's the problem right now, so you missed.
I know the drones are seemingly taking over the delivery side of things. They'll get more and more.
All right, very true. Can we go to full screen? Okay. So let me introduce myself. I'm Brian German. I'm an associate professor in aerospace engineering at Georgia Tech, and our director of our Center for Urban and Regional Air Mobility, which is an initiative we started in 2019 to look at these new forms of aviation. I mentioned I'm a Georgia boy, so I'm from Lafayette, Georgia, up in the northwest portion of the state. Grew up with aviation. My father's a private pilot. Used to fly out of Barwood Field quite frequently in this little lake amphibian, hopping around all the little lakes up in North Georgia and had a great time. And that's what led me to go to Georgia Tech and pursue aerospace engineering. I did all three of my degrees at Georgia Tech, aerospace, bachelor's, master's, and PhD. Joined the faculty in 2008 and have been working there since and loving every minute of it. I had a connection to the Georgia legislature when I was a kid. I was a page in the Georgia Senate for Senator Sonny Huggins, who used to be a longtime senator serving from my district. So let's take you through a bit about electric aircraft and what's going on. You might ask, why is aviation electrifying? And we could argue to what extent and when that's going to happen. The first bit that is actually not on this slide is a kind of almost inevitability, I think. If we look at the electrification of cars, well, the natural next thing when we get the batteries a little bit better, somebody's going to try airplanes. People are going to try that and see what happens. So that's kind of where we are now. And I'll talk in a minute about why now, why it's getting there more quickly. But, from a broader perspective, the first thing people probably think about when you think about electrifying transportation is, greener, right? So there's a lot of talk about carbon dioxide emissions, reduce those with electric aircraft. But there's another important one that affects general aviation, and that's lead emissions. As many of you know, if you're private pilots, 100 low lead is pretty much the only option for a lot of general aviation piston-powered airplanes. They need that lead to get the compression levels to give them high performance. Lead's a problem. I actually just served on a National Academies committee where we looked at lead in piston engine airplanes, what we could do to get out of it, right? We've had unleaded automobiles for 20 years now, and unleaded fuel in automobiles. We can't do it yet in aviation. So, one potential solution is to electrify to solve that. There's a lot of other work on alternative fuels, though, I should mention, and that's going to be a nearer term type of thing. One interesting aspect of that committee on lead that I'll just mention as a side note, the EPA gave us a presentation in which they looked at lead emissions at airports, and one of the airports they highlighted was our dear friends at Peachtree DeKalb Airport here, who have a playground right next to a run-up area. I take my kids to that playground and love it, because we love to go look at airplanes. But a point was being made that lead's not great for kids, and now we've got this sort of a situation. So, part of that issue, which we could talk about all for quite a bit of time, is just, pragmatic issues, where you site run-up areas and how you do these things. It connects into airport infrastructure, even in the near term before we get to electrification. Right, but if we electrify aircraft, we can be greener. But here's the other big deal. It's not just about environmental impact. It's about business. It's about the economics of the situation. If we can source energy from the electric grid at 11 cents per kilowatt hour, compared to $6 a gallon for 100 low lead, or maybe $5 a gallon for Jet A, there's a potential 25% or more direct energy cost benefit, as NASA has shown right there. But it doesn't. Yes.
I hate to interrupt. I've been staring at that and it's driving me crazy. What's the thrust rating I'm going to get out of 11 kilowatts per hour of electricity versus, we know what it is for a gallon of Jet A. It just seems like a really awkward comparison there.
Well, I didn't convert it. I should have given you an equivalent number, right?
Right.
And I don't know that math in my head. I have to also go do that math. But as I mentioned, when that NASA study looked at 25% reduction in energy cost, it was matching that up to the same airplane. You size the batteries, you size the motors to fly that airplane, an equivalent economic distance.
Okay, and because there's currently no turbine version of an electric. Obviously you can't replace a turbine engine with electric. So that, the most efficient right now I think is the 330. There is no way to compare that at all. So I just want to make sure that it's not that simple.
Yeah, and I would certainly love to work with you and get you those numbers. That's something that we could do. We could run up a comparison.
Sorry, my hair heat was just driving. I apologize.
No problem, it's a great question. But the other aspect beyond just direct energy costs is maintenance costs. And you can have a dramatic reduction in the moving parts of the engine, right? So thousands of parts that say a general aviation piston engine now gets replaced with an electric motor with basically 2 moving parts. And I'll give you some numbers on what that does to overhaul costs in just a minute. It's really pretty striking. Those two together, NASA estimates 40% impact on direct operating costs for these aircraft. Okay, so that's a pretty big deal. Again, this is now thinking mostly small general aviation aircraft. Lastly, in terms of why electric, well, they're quieter and potentially arguably more comfortable. You can eliminate the noise from combustion. Little general aviation airplanes still have mufflers, so you hear it at some distance. But these things are whisper quiet in terms of the engine. You still hear the propeller, right? So maybe that's why electric. But you might say, why now electric? Well, the big issue is how much energy you can fit in that box that is the battery of a given mass, given weight. And in the past, that's been woefully inadequate. But now, due to our cell phones, due to cars, we're getting to the point where you can size an aircraft to fly a reasonable range of economic interest with batteries that are on the horizon and coming out of consumer electronics. And that's why now everything's taken off in this world. The second bit is motors. If you looked at a high-power DC electric motor, like you might see in, say, a factory, industrial motor, These things are big and they're heavy. In aviation, we can't tolerate that weight, so getting what we call specific power, high enough amount of power per weight of that motor has been the other issue. And the last one, and that's getting there, that's really getting there, we've got new companies that have emerged here in the US and internationally specifically targeting building motors of that power class. And lastly, the regulators are finally learning enough about these technologies to be able to certificate the aircraft as safe. When will these aircraft arrive? The answer is now. It's happening. We are at the leading edge of this happening around the world. Pipistrel is a Slovenian company, a lovely little country here by Italy. I'm hoping to go in a year or two and visit. They're developing, and actually building, they're producing in serial production this aircraft you see on the right there. It's called the Velis Electro. It's the first certificated electric airplane, certificated to the European light sport aircraft standard. And what it offers is dramatically lower operating costs. So we talked about sort of the energy cost, but here's a maintenance cost number for you. The electric motor on that airplane, the company says has to have one scheduled maintenance item done at 2,000 flight hours of operation. That's to replace some bearings. And it costs about $500. If you're a general aviation pilot and you've flown a Rotax 912 powered airplane, Lycoming or Continental powered airplane, you'll know that a major overhaul at 2,000 hours might be half the cost of the engine, right? So we could be talking $10,000, $20,000 or more. This aircraft is being flown and sold into the U.S. market now, but in the U.S. it can only be flown as an experimental category airplane at present. But Pipistrel's working hard with the FAA to get a light sport aircraft certification so they can sell into flight schools. And this is a big deal. This would make a wonderful flight training aircraft for short hops, pattern work, and basic training, and dramatically, again, reduce cost of flight training, which we have a shortage of pilots in this country. Getting people in flight training is exciting, and getting them excited about new technology is one way of doing it. I'll mention to you this image on the lower right here, which is showing 4 Pipistrel Alpha electrodes. This is the predecessor to the Velis. These were purchased by a public-private consortium in Fresno, California. And they built a network of 4 regional airports, and they connected them with little electric infrastructure for charging, and they operate these aircraft ultimately in flight schools. They're preparing for that, again, waiting for that certification so they can do it. Gaining a lot of operational experience right now. More is coming. So we start small and we start to grow. Buy Aerospace in Colorado is a new manufacturer that has the Buy Aerospace E-Flyer 2 and 4 in certification. You see a prototype there on the left that's flying. They're working on production conforming aircraft now. Plans to certificate the aircraft by late 2022 or early 2023. The same company is also looking at a 9-seat aircraft called the E-Flyer 800. So this now starts to address the commuter aviation market, right? So connecting small cities over short hops. The Aviation Alice, similar 11-seat aircraft, range of as much as 440 miles they claim. And then on the right, the Tecnam P-Volt, which is the Tecnam P-2012, is an Italian airplane that was introduced and certificated just a few years ago with conventional Lycoming engines, and it's now being developed into an electric aircraft. So a lot of exciting things in the near-term horizon in the next year or two. Now we go bigger. We go to some bigger electric and hydrogen-powered regional aircraft. So on the left, you see an airplane out of Sweden called Heart Aerospace. These folks have raised a lot of money. Pure electric, relatively short-range airplane, conventional configuration, but with 4 motors there. Certification plan in 2026, 19-seat. Okay, so this is Part 135 commercial operations category right here. When you get the airplanes to be bigger, at some point that battery-specific energy just isn't enough for the number of seats you need, the speed you need. And So we see hydrogen making an appearance. Hydrogen's green, right? That's one advantage. The other advantage is you can pass it through a fuel cell and produce electricity and distribute that electricity to your power plant. And all your components, these electrical motors and components on the airplane, otherwise remain the same. The problem with hydrogen is it's really hard to distribute and integrate. So the company on the right, Universal Hydrogen, that you see there, has developed a novel approach to package hydrogen in modules that are transported in shipping containers to local airports where you can load them with something like a forklift or cargo loading equipment on an airplane into the back of the airplane and power. So this kind of thing is on the horizon. In the spirit of disclosure, I have done some consulting work with Universal Hydrogen. I don't want to show that in any different vein otherwise, but just to be clear, so you're aware. You may have seen these aircraft showing up recently in the press. And what do we call them? Some people call these aircraft eVTOL, VTOL vertical takeoff and landing. Old aerospace term, E for electric. These aircraft have functionality similar to helicopters. They can take off and land vertically on a helipad, but they can also so-called transition to forward fly at higher speeds to get you more efficiency in cruise flight and get more range and more speed. The reason these aircraft look so different than helicopters is that electric allows you to distribute propulsion without the interfering penalties. So you can put propellers where you need them for aerodynamic efficiency and safety. You can do novel things with that. Now, this started in 2017, really, with efforts by Uber to get into this space, and has really blossomed since then incredibly. In fact, the Vertical Flight Society, which is the professional society for helicopter manufacturers in the U.S., tracks the development of this industry. And currently they are tracking well over 200 projects, companies, startups, big aerospace companies, automotive companies who are producing or planning to produce products in this field. Now, some of those are people in their garage, but many of them, like you see in this slide, are very serious operations. A few of the companies on this slide have recently gone public with SPACs, special purpose acquisition companies, with valuations of $2 to $4 billion. Joby, Lillian, and Archer that you see on the screen are those highlights. And the automotive companies, as I mentioned, are coming in, particularly out of Korea, Hyundai and Honda out of Japan, getting involved. I should say particularly out of Asia, Korea, and Japan. The earliest certifications are expected in as soon as 2022 with Joby. They're flying aircraft, that's an actual prototype flying around, doing endurance testing, and they're working on production conforming aircraft. Now there's a lot of words on this slide, and maybe this is just a resource for your committee, but you might ask the question, why does this matter? What's going to be the impact on aviation markets and society? It's cross-cutting in a lot of ways. First, we should distinguish all of these aircraft are in part enabled by electric propulsion, in part by things like autonomy that's coming, and they address different segments of markets. So NASA has developed an umbrella term they call advanced air mobility to subsume all of this. Within that, they talk about urban air mobility for the air taxis, which take off from rooftops to rooftops, and then regional air mobility, which is our conventional takeoff and landing airplanes that are electric and might fly on regional airports, right? So now we can reduce travel time. We can connect smaller cities to the bigger cities and to hubs much more readily. And again, dropping the bottom out of the price point. So that what people believe is going to happen is that the price drop is going to induce demand. We're going to have a lot more demand for aviation. And indeed, it's because it's short-range trips mostly, until we get our batteries worked out. The competition is not other airplanes, it's cars, right? So do we take ground traffic and we literally elevate it? So those are the kind of opportunities that are out there. And to give you a sense of the scale of manufacturing enterprise that people are talking about, not hundreds of aircraft per year like thousands even, but tens in that scale, now this is gonna be potentially 10, 15 years, 20 years down the road, tens of thousands of aircraft per year, hundreds of thousands of aircraft per year around the world. And that scale of manufacturing is not something that aerospace knows about. That's closer to the automotive companies, which is again why you see them pivoting and trying things. Now, the focus of your committee, my understanding, is on infrastructure. And so I took my best guess of some of the infrastructure we can look forward to with the arrival of these aircraft. Battery chargers that may have initially look like what you charge an electric car with, but scaling up in power ultimately, and ultimately scaling up in number as these aircraft increase. But you need to get power to the airports. So suddenly now your electrical grid, your electrical distribution system has to have the capacity to handle high power chargers at airports. Airports have a lot of latent empty space. I shouldn't say that to our friend from Fidelia who doesn't have enough space. But if you have space along the runway, maybe you can put solar panels, charge battery banks at the airport, recharge airplanes. People are talking about that. That's something that's pretty interesting. Firefighting equipment. Lithium-ion batteries catching fire is not something you put out with water. That requires special firefighting equipment and training. Most fire departments are becoming capable of doing that because of all the Teslas on the road. They have to have that training, but we need to start thinking about that for airports. Hydrogen storage, of course, goes along with it. And then in quotes on the slide, you see the word vertiports. Vertiport is becoming a catchword for this vertical takeoff and landing pad for these eVTOL air taxis. Boy, that's a hard problem. How many of them do you put in the city? How do we handle land use, zoning, planning, community acceptance issues? Big questions there. And there's a few more comments here on the slide, but for the sake of time, I won't go through them. Maybe one more I'll mention. Flight test ranges, facilities. This is an evolving industry. Companies are pouring money into this, and can we do this? What are other states doing? A few examples. Ohio has made a big move into this. They had a symposium in February 2020, the Fly Ohio Initiative. They're collaborating with the Air Force and NASA, and have recently brought two of these eVTOL manufacturers to the state. Texas, Dallas-Fort Worth area was an early participant in Uber Elevate work in this area. They've been studying this problem in their area for now about 5 years. They're leveraging their connections with aerospace manufacturers such as Bell in the state. And they recently just passed a state bill, SB 763, creation of the Urban Air Mobility Advisory Committee. Washington, November of last year, completed an electric aircraft feasibility study. And lastly, Canada, the Community Air Mobility Initiative. You see that map on the right shows different states and different organizations collaborating with CAMI to look at cross-cutting issues around how communities would accept this and how do we prepare. What can we do in Georgia? I think incentives to manufacturers and operators, consideration of advisory committees on this topic, connect the planning of electric aviation with the planning that the state is already doing with initiatives related to electric automobiles, battery manufacturers that are recently moving into Georgia. How can we capitalize on that and bring manufacturers here? Policies, of course, that we can use to develop vertiports, public-private partnerships with our great aerospace industry here in the state. A test range. What if we had a flagship test range here in Georgia between regional airports where you fly these aircraft, you instrument the facilities, and you become a place to do business, to do flight tests? I'm from a university, would love it if we could get good investment from the state in the topic of training and research in this area and facilities that would help us move forward. If you could help us with that, it'd be really wonderful. I'll give you two or three slides real quick about what we're doing at Georgia Tech. I mentioned I'm the co-director of our Center for Urban and Regional Air Mobility. We're connecting across campus, not just engineering, but economics, policy, and business, how we can make this happen. Connections go beyond aviation. We're focusing on the one hand, the aircraft technology, on the left, but on the other hand, the operations, policy, and public perception pieces of the puzzle. There's a lot of work here to do. purchased as a kit, and we're planning to build and convert into a large research aircraft in collaboration now with NASA. This is exciting, the students love it, it's really amazing fun work. Lastly, we are exploring the idea of building what we're calling a hangar, colloquially on campus at Georgia Tech in Midtown, to do research work, applied integrated aerospace systems work on electric propulsion integrated onto aircraft. I should say we're exploring, we've had an architecture firm do a feasibility study. I don't want to get ahead of the Board of Regents. They will have to ultimately approve any construction that would happen at Georgia Tech. But we are actively seeking funding and ways to move forward with this idea to really invigorate this research enterprise at Georgia Tech. And we'd love to partner with some local airports, some regional airports, for a test range where we can fly these aircraft. With that, it's been a pleasure to talk with you guys.
Thank you, appreciate you. Comments, everyone. You know, think outside the box. Any questions?
I do have more of a request than a question, because my name's Greg T. I work with Core Engineering. We do a lot of aviation engineering work with a lot of these local governments. And one of the things we heard Mr. Reagan say earlier was how much of their local funding comes off fuel cells. Well, this is exciting, this is great. It's the same issue we're having with electric vehicles, with a lot of the funding for our roadways coming off of fuel taxes and things like that. You're taking that income stream away from those local governments. So I would request that as you're looking at this, think about the business model for the regional airports to say, if you're gonna lose those fuel cells, which I love the technology, it's exciting, and it's great, but it's gonna have a business impact on how Mr. Reagan runs Vidalia Airport if he starts losing those fuel cells that he was highlighting earlier from those coming in. In addition to, we gotta add new infrastructure for the charging, for the electric grid on top of that. So we're increasing in infrastructure cost and we're decreasing the revenue stream. So I don't wanna discourage anything, but that needs to be a critical piece of this, of saying, how do we make that business model work for Vidalia and all those other local airports?
It's a great point. It's a great point. Thanks, Bill.
Well, I was on this, and Mr. Chairman, my comments was, well, damn, I would never believe. And then I've heard a little bitty rumors and things in the Wall Street Journal, and you brought it to light, what it could be, and it's very exciting. Yours was the second comment I wrote down after we got that. That's, you know, we've got to look at that for sure. So thank you.
Thank you
We
very much.
appreciate it.
I have
Oh, excuse me, Robert.
Just at the level of airport that we are, Hunter low-lead is an issue, and we know that everyone is working to get away from that. There are a number of fuel suppliers out there that no longer even refine that type of fuel. Shell was one of them that got out of the business. And then there are a number of truck hauling companies that no longer will haul under the low-lead, because it's not really worth it for them. We're talking about maybe 2% of the fuel that is refined in the entire United States, and you have to shut down the whole facility, refine some gas, bring it back down, get it set up for the next fuel, and it's really, and all the freight costs from the time it gets from wherever it comes from, through a barge to a truck to the airport to our system, their system. There's freight all along the way. It's a very expensive fuel. You can't look at car gas prices and think somehow that lines up with ag gas. It doesn't. So part of our planning going forward with our airport layout plans, we're adding a vertiport to our plan. And that's something that the small airports need to start thinking about, is that infrastructure, because we know it's coming. But we know Hunter low-lead is also not going to be replaced in a while. It's going to be a few years, but it's coming.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments, and when I look at everybody's time, you know, we need to take a break. We're not gonna take a long break. You got 7 minutes, so don't be long.
Ms. Sellers, thank you for being here, and you came from Kansas City, is that not true?
That'd be the home of the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yes.
Yes, that's right.
Well, we're glad you're here today, and we're sorry we didn't get to speak at a previous meeting that you came to, but we're glad you're with us.
Yeah, well, I went on a personal mission, so I got an invite to come to the first committee meeting. So I went to my husband, I'm like, give me a flight, I gotta get down there. He's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'll tell you later. So anyway, my personal mission is a little bit about myself. I am the CEO and co-founder of My Smart Plans. I come from the belly of the whale, like the story of Jonah. My husband was the largest commercial painting contractor in Kansas City for 43 years. He had a legacy company that he started whenever he was 18. And we got into a digital disaster and we ended up closing his company. It cost us almost $1 million. So you could call me a sworn housewife, I don't know, but anyway, I'm like, what happened? How is this? So we started investigating. Digital disasters are the thing of the future. And what it is about is that the I hate that word, I'm sorry, but it's a real word, corruption and change order games and all the stuff that happens during construction is out of control. So the reason I'm standing here before you is to talk about a solution, not to come and bring you a problem that we already know exists. I'm here to talk about what we've created. Our company is 14 years old. We're managing airports across the country, including KCI, which is $1.5 billion. We have small airports as well. It all is the same challenge. It's getting those documents organized so that everyone has the same information, fair play, and providing a workforce for everyone that's on the project. We all know right now that in construction, finding subcontractors is a huge problem. The supply chain is a huge problem. If those records are not in order, we're just burning through money. So the new thing in the market is called digital twin, which I'm like, that's a great idea. We've been doing that for 14 years. But basically, it's all about information governance. So My Smart Plans, we act as a third-party mediator, mitigator, gatekeeper of all documentation. Everything flows through us, kind of like the control tower. Every plane flies through there, they know what's going on, they tell them where to go. Same concept with My Smart Plans. But it's about information governance because it's making sure that all the documents are complete and organized, making sure that the owners like Billy, I mean, he's already doing everything. I'm like amazed at him, I cannot follow him. But I mean, can you imagine now putting another project on him and saying, oh yeah, by the way, now you're gonna manage these new these new hangars you're gonna get in this new runway. He's like, could you just organize it for me and I will have it handled. So that's what we're talking about, is keeping everyone with the ability to make great decisions and protecting the asset that you could potentially be giving them, because it's all about money, right? It's all about making sure that everything is protected. So we're unique in the fact that we are digital librarians. Again, we are tracking and organizing on behalf of the project. We are not engineers, we're not architects, we're digital librarians. We're like at Yale University or Georgia Tech. When you walk in a library, there are these people sitting there smiling because they are addicted to organization. This is what we did. We're addicted to making sure that those projects are supported every aspect. The digital twin includes the BIM model. It includes all the environmental, all the money that you give them. You want to make sure that it's not just light a match and all of a sudden it's in the hands of somebody else. So we're saying protect the project and the integrity of the project with information governance. Here's what our deliverable looks like. Again, it's the idea that airports are held hostage to the documentation. So at the end of the project, we're leaving, I'm leaving today to go back to Kansas City, then I'm going back to Miami on Tuesday, Fort Lauderdale. Fort Lauderdale has a project that was supposed to be 4 years long, and it's now 7 years, and they still can't get the project finished. Because it's just what happens, and everything's in silos, so there's no tracking all that data. So we're making sure that the airport has the information they need to run the facility for the next 50 years. The digital twin architect of record, again, is in place, but it's keeping all that information so that whenever the new batteries, which by the way, that was so impressive, I want to ride on one of those planes. Whenever that comes in, everything is able to be transformed with audits, organization, and protecting, again, all the documentation as well, which is ultimately going to protect the budget. So here's QR codes. Again, this is a deliverable, making sure that you can walk by any room for the facility piece and manage the information without waiting time, which time is money. In summary, this is easy. We're here to protect the project. We're here to provide peace of mind, and whenever money is given to a project, you can support and make sure that the project will be delivered, that you will not get a phone call or be on the evening news that says, oh, this money is just now, or there's litigation or we're in this situation, and we've seen it all. But basically that's my story, and I'm sure you have a lot of questions for me, like where did I get this jacket for? Because you know you want one.
Yes.
I'm kidding. Any questions for me?
Billy has one.
Oh, Billy.
I have one from the audience if that's allowed.
Yes.
The cost of your service, is that eligible for reimbursement under the AIP
Yes,
in Georgia?
yes. I've been to DC 4 different times. I met with Kirk Schaefer, which is no longer in office, but he made sure that we are eligible through the AIP process to make sure that, and it still goes through the ADO approval, but all the ADOs, most of them know about us. So the reason that the FAA supported us is because they said whenever they come in and they try to audit a project, it's just another nightmare to try to get all those documents together. With us, it's a click of a button and we've got it all organized. So not everyone likes the idea of the big brother, but they like it whenever there's a problem.
Is that front end or back end?
What, you mean?
Like when you get you come in after the approval, or is you paying up front and getting the reimbursement?
He's gonna go through the ADO office, so they're gonna make a decision, yes or no, whenever we can come in and play.
Okay,
So,
that's good for you.
So would it be basically contract administration through a GDOT grant? Is that, because we don't go through the ADO, the
Yes.
smaller airports.
Yeah,
So for
yeah.
us, I guess my question is to GDOT then, is that contract administration or what would that be?
We're gonna check on that, because you have to make sure that, these are, sometimes they're considered proprietary software, so maybe the whole package still, when you have to put it out, for proposal, that sort of thing, but we'll check.
we just did this with the Corps of Engineers. So the Air Force mandated us, so the Corps of Engineers went through this extensive process, so we have a lot of experience with government, which that project just finished. I'm actually in the ribbon cutting ceremony. I don't have my yellow jacket, but it was 3 months ahead of schedule. The first time that there was no modifications on the project, which is unheard of, and twice we stopped corruption on the project. So the game is the general contractor can just change documents to say whatever it is that you want to say. I'm sorry if I'm offending people, but I'm just saying, I can't be tamped down because I've seen too much. But let's just do the right thing. Let's protect the taxpayers' money and make sure that these airports are getting the money that they deserve to run their facility, and it's not just off somewhere. Any other questions?
Thank you much, Shelley. Appreciate your comments.
I'll be taking my notes with me.
Okay. Next, we got Hugh Weaver with ponds in here.
I'm going to start. Chairman Ginn, Chairman Jaspers, honorable members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak. As you mentioned, my name is Hugh Weaver, Vice President of Aviation of Condon Company. We are a colleague of Greg and Croy Engineering, and I've been doing airport engineering for 35 years. In attending these committee sessions, I had opportunity to reflect on a lot of the presentations, the questions, the thoughts, and Larry kind of teed up in his question or homework assignment, I think it was, for what are other states doing. So I put together a thought piece on the airport infrastructure and the need for aircraft storage hangars. Tony has positioned this well, so you don't have to look at the slide presentation is actually behind you. As I begin, I'd like to reinforce a notion presented by Carol Comer in her September 8th Aviation System Plan presentation, that Georgia has an airport system, not just 104 individual airports. This mindset is very foundational as we explore ongoing needs. I often admonish the notion that it was the Wright brothers' invention that was the transformative development in flight, and submit to you that it was the jet that developed the second airport. It was only then they had somewhere to go. You've heard that Georgia airports mean business. That was also a part of her presentation in the economic impact study. Growth of our aviation infrastructure is not an end unto itself, but it is the catalyst to drive economic development, and it will foster the rise of quality of life for Georgia's citizens. I'd like to begin by reading an excerpt from a recent article. It was in the June 9th magazine of AOPA magazine, which is Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association. Aircraft hangars are in high demand and short supply, with some airports compiling waiting lists that can top several years, according to 2 surveys. The survey results assert that over 70% of airports surveyed have a waiting list for their hangars. According to Tullis, and Mario can corroborate this, DeKalb Peachtree Airport, north of Atlanta, had a 7-year waiting list for county-run hangars that stretched to 15 years. The article further states, in addition to a lack of funding, grant availability was cited in the survey as a major impediment to new hangar construction. Other challenges included costs associated with site development, insurance, engineering, architectural designs, building code compliance, as well as a concern about recouping development costs at current lease rates. Airports that have successfully developed new T hangars and community hangars have noticed a rise in airport gross revenues, increased local economic impact, and increased employment opportunities. One of the paradoxes of general aviation is trying to make sense of hangar availability. Even though overall flying has rebounded after the commencement of the COVID pandemic, tax registries of aircraft are reducing. Trying to find a hangar at many airports is an exercise on getting on waiting lists or going through seeming never-ending procedures for approval to build a hangar, including permits, design reviews, and rate negotiations. Further complicating matters, airports that receive funds through FAA's Airport Improvement Program, AIP, commit to do a list of assurances, committing to operate and maintain the airport within terms set forth in this agreement. Grant assurance number 38 calls for airport land leases for hangar construction to be long-term. A ground lease must be long enough for the aircraft owner to build the hangar, pay it off, and get some value for its use. The FAA provides only loose guidance, giving airport sponsors leeway in defining what is long-term. Since an airport-owned hangar structure is leased at a higher rate than just a ground lease, some airport sponsors desire to limit the terms to gain the value of the structure asset. The tenant user then is motivated to maximize the use term of the facility that's constructed. Common rule of thumb for hangar rental prices is that the busier the airport, often a popular locale, the more expensive the hangar rental rate. Rental rates also increase in relation to the quality of the hangar, whether it has electricity, and the complexity of the hangar door installed. Many appraisers use proximate mini storage warehouses as comps for evaluating hangar rents. So that'll tell you where the number is in those rates per square foot. With current construction conditions, this value offers little for airports or tenants to amortize their assets with a competitive return on their investment. Airports are forced to make individual competitive market decisions when adjusting those rates, fearing that rate increases will drive tenants to other locations. Georgia does not currently have a comprehensive rate analysis that allows airport sponsors to make informed decisions and therein limit their ability to abide by the rules of FAA for self-sufficiency. In my day job, and Greg will relate to this, we often have to invoke a pragmatic approach in problem solving. The first thing this group has to recognize is that all 50 states are wrangling with similar issues. We can learn from other successes and failures. So I wanted to present what are some of the other states doing. In Minnesota, they have the State Hangar Loan Revolving Account Program. It provides an 80% interest-free loan to state system airports for building new hangars. The loans are paid back in equal monthly installments over 20 years. Payment receipts, as they become available, are then loaned out to other airports needing hangars. The Minnesota State Legislature established the Hangar Loan Program in 1957. The current capability of the program is about $4.4 million. Its purpose is to provide loans to publicly owned airports, allowing them the ability for revenue-generating hangar facilities and to protect the state's fleet of general aviation aircraft. The Commissioner of Transportation maintains this account, and loans are processed through the Minnesota Department of Transportation Office of Aeronautics. The loan agreement obligates the airport to own and operate the hangar for a minimum of 20 years and requires the hangar to be used for storing aircraft, not boats. And the current rate of interest on these loans is 0%. 75 communities have utilized 209 loans to build 1,118 aircraft storage hangars since the first loan in 1959.
How much snow did they get in Minnesota?
A little more than 2 inches. I think.
Yeah. That's what I was gonna say. I just wanna make sure we're talking apples to apples, because
They don't sit well out in the wet. Yes, sir.
Just a quick, or not quick, help me, $4.4 million for the whole program?
That's how much the account has maintained as a balance, and then they feed the loans off of it. So it's a revolving account. So your airport may get a loan for money to build that, then as it's paid back, it's like a building savings and loan. So it's a revolving account.
Do you know how much they started that program with?
In 1957, I can certainly research that.
That would be a place back.
Yeah, then you're gonna make me do a current dollars comparison. So in Florida, Florida's DOT work program also includes a significant focus on the maintenance and construction of aircraft hangars. There was almost $263 million requested of the state of Florida for these types of building projects in the program. And they funded $82 million in the current work program. In that 5-year work program, there were $115 million in aviation funds expected to be spent on airports in Florida. As shown in this table, 6% of that $115 million was spent on aircraft storage hangars. That's really significant. Recent discussions have talked about the demand, but what about the roadblock to development? Here's the reality. Many airports find that financial reconciliation on hangar development costs is not often recognized till 30 years of its construction. This leaves little salvage value for the asset. The airport is also obligated to be self-sustaining, and such developments obligate large amounts of cash reserves. The weakness is that the market rate for hangar space has not trended to align with current construction costs. The airport system struggles to pass those costs on to consumers. So
that doesn't make sense to me.
It does to me.
I mean, the market, if there are this many airplanes sitting on runways and in the paved parking lots, you would think the demand, I mean, just a simple supply and demand curve would demand a higher rental rate.
Well, part of the problem is your ability to make educated decisions about what that value is.
Well, I mean, no, but if you're sitting there, if you're in the sun, you want to say it's $275. You got the decision.
Correct.
I don't care what's going on by day.
But I can tell you what does happen, is that a large number of the counties and cities will take a loss on rental rates because they're getting the ad valorem income.
Yeah.
So they
Well,
offset
sure.
that, so I don't get that, so I'm competing with other airports who literally operate at a loss.
Yeah, but there's waiting lists a mile long, so
And
right
there's
now,
waiting list a mile long. So those other
We're
airports
saying the
don't
competition
increase
is in
their
your
rental
favor.
rates. They don't, because they're getting the ad valorem. So when they look at me, wow, you're really high. No, I'm charging what it should be.
Right.
And not everybody does.
And that's what Hugh's point is, the market rate has not caught up with what the real cost of the project is.
And part of that is the isolation factor of the individual airport. They think they understand what their market will bear, but there's a fear that someone's going to undermine them at a nearby airport. What Wisconsin did in establishing a market rate for hangars is that they prepare an annual survey of rates and charges and related air activities. Per the Wisconsin Administrative Code, airports were required to submit responses as a condition of receiving funding. More importantly, the survey results served as a comparative tool to help airports gauge these financial practices and needs. I heard someone say earlier, rising tides raise all boats. I think Ms. Myrna said it. Part of the hesitation is that if one airport raises it, then all their based aircraft will leave, and the adjoining airports will get the benefit. Several states find value in this systems-based approach to valuation of hangars and fuel pricing. Like the development of the statewide aviation system plan and the economic impact study, states often lead in the inventory and market analysis of aircraft tie-downs, fuel prices, and hangar rents. This effort can be undertaken by that individual airport, but individual airport sponsors have no means to compel the neighboring airports to respond to a survey, and they fear a loss of that competitive edge. The results of that statewide analysis of hangar rates could be used to evaluate what that fair and equitable charges defined in FAA's grant assurances, and could be used as a statewide effort to make system-wide adjustments. These adjustments would ensure proper return on investment for funded developments. But what other tools are out there? We got to make sure we're using all of the tools in the toolbox. In 2019, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, under the leadership of avid aviation enthusiast Secretary Sonny Perdue, anybody heard of him? Introduced the Community Facilities Direct Loan Program, which provides affordable funding to develop essential community facilities. The funds can be used to purchase, construct, and/or improve essential community facilities, purchase equipment, and pay related project expenses. Important to note that in the description of the program, examples of essential community facilities include public facilities such as town halls, courthouses, airport hangars, bridges, port authorities, and street improvements. So there is an indisputable need for study and plans for improvements on airport infrastructure and services needed to meet Georgia's aviation system users now and in the future. America's airports are powerful engines for economic opportunity in the local communities. While aviation traffic continues to grow at record pace, our outdated aviation infrastructure cannot keep pace with the overwhelming demand. FAA's long-held Airways and Airports Trust Fund has been the primary funding source for general aviation. Under that program, general aviation, reliever, and non-primary commercial service airports are apportioned 20% of FAA AIP funds for apportionment nationally. From this, all airports, excluding non-reliever and primary airports, receive the lesser of the following: $150,000, or 1/5 of the estimated 5-year cost for airport development for each of these airports listed in the NIPIAS. Remaining funds are distributed according to state-based population and area formula. FAA makes those decisions on the use of those funds. Nearly all states provide funds for airports primarily in the form of grants as matching shares for FAA or as separate state grants. State grants and their grant programs through a variety of sources, including aviation fuel, aircraft sales tax, highway taxes, bonds, and general fund appropriations. There is no silver bullet in funding for aviation in Georgia. There's various ways that the state can assist in funding of airport developments. Key mechanisms that should be explored by state leadership in support of airport development operations include loans, loan guarantees, increased direct grants and equity injections, as well as discount on user charges funded by governments, reinvestment of taxes and real property at airports to their maintenance upkeep, and increased state aviation funding with reduced restrictions on hangar construction. Just some food for thought. Did not have hard conclusions, but we want to learn about what others are doing, and appreciate the opportunity to present to you all today.
Yeah, I guess one more quick question.
Sure.
It's really discussion more than anything. I'm just curious, under hangars that have been built the last 5 years on our airports, I'd be curious how they're currently funded. Yeah, I talked to one the other day where I think they have a better relationship with their county than many do. And the county floated a bond guaranteed by SPOS dollars. They're building a bunch.
Mhm.
And they're gonna build mega, like, big jets if they need it. But I don't know how that's used in other areas, or how are these other people funding? Yeah, I'm just
Well,
curious.
there is no one single answer to that, but that is definitely a tool in the toolbox. It takes money to make money, right? So a lot of airports find that the only way that they have the means to advance that is through a ground lease. So they say, Mr. Aircraft Owner, you want to build a hangar, I'll lease you this piece of ground. You build all the capital construction at a lease term. And that's what I reference as the fact that FAA is not clear on what that term is. The airport is motivated to get it as soon as they can, because then they can rent it at a higher rate. The tenant user wants that hangar until it's just rust that's standing up there and no salvage value. So it becomes a sometimes unhealthy tension on what that term is. But that is a means, is to use that private funding. Hangars can be eligible at the state and local level, and certainly the state endeavors to cover a lot of costs related to site development, access, and other site improvements to offset that. The T-SPLOT money is there. With AIP, there have been hangar developments that take and bank that $150,000 a year till they have the funds in hand to build it, or front up the costs out of their general funds and get reimbursed over the program. This USDA loan program is an interesting one, although it's only available to rural communities with low population count. But it gives them the money to gather up that large cash amount for the initial investment. In more popular locations, and Mario could probably speak to this, where there are actual developers that are interested in getting that ground lease, they will invest and build those hangars there. You also see in some cases the concept of hangar condoing. That's where a group of pilots and aircraft owners will say, we'll go in together on this ground lease, and we will operate it as an organized condominium with the terms that go with that. So lots of ways, but they're all very limited in the availability and access to the seed money.
I guess the last, I think the association that answered this, I thought about this driving in. You know, we talk about the number of aircraft needing a hangar. And I guess, does that take into account that if I'm looking, I've got an application in at 3 different airports. Does it subtract, does it de-number that into how many I'm really out there? That's what I was curious.
And that's a good question. And that's why I made the comment that the tax registry showed the number of based aircraft in Georgia going down. And it doesn't equal the list of the waiting list. You find that some airports, I hope you may be able to speak on this, actually require a deposit to validate that waiting list. That shortens the list significantly when people have to plunk down money. But you will find an aircraft owner who is interested in getting a hangar. He's going to put his name on several lists and hope that one comes available at some point. So I attended your commission meeting last week, and there was an aircraft. He wasn't even an aircraft owner yet. He was trying to get in the hangar before he bought the airplane, simply because getting into the hangar is such a challenge. We don't know the numbers, and that's the challenge in there.
And I can speak to that. So we have a team hangar waiting list of over 100 people. And then another list for our shared community hangar of 50, something like that. So we just recently implemented the hangar deposit. So you put down $100, and you get the hangar, goes for your first month's rent. If you
Just 100.
for the teenagers, yeah, for $100. And we also put requirements in there that you have, an airplane when you do go in there. So if your name comes up on the list and you don't have an airplane yet, you're not going in the hangar. So, yeah, and I do know that there are people on my list that are on every surrounding list that
Yes,
in my area. I think Mario has one.
I can speak to the waiting list and the efforts of it.
Well, Mario, what we're gonna do is we're gonna ask you to sit down, we're gonna ask you to come up.
It's a good time. You might think that.
We're gonna get done here, we're gonna get done here in a minute.
We're gonna get done here, because I hate to be the person standing in front of us.
You're the last but not least.
I do have one question, I don't know who answers it, but does anybody know what the occupancy rate is for the hangar space in Georgia?
100%.
So that's what I assumed, which goes to the chairman's previous comment about supply and demand. You know, that's a pretty damn good spot to be in the supply and demand model.
So I'll talk about that.
I just find it hard to believe that we need to supplement or augment that process when that demand is that high.
Yeah, and to, with a huge point too, a study or to know, tell airports what the rates should be, because not everybody's charging what they should be.
Well, and this is where, you
I
know,
think
for-
we didn't charge as much as you could.
And I do.
We tried. So,
Sorry.
with that, no, that's fine. Thank you this morning, legislative committee, for allowing me to speak. I know I've entertained you all with the Education Appropriations Committee out at PDK. Good morning again, my name is Mario Evans, and I am the airport director at DeKalb Peachtree Airport, the second busiest airport in the state, to my big brother who was here earlier, who left. We are the second busiest in takeoff and landings, and we're out of 5 Metro Atlanta airports, with Cobb, Fulton, Gwinnett, and Peachtree City included in that, and we all are regional relievers of Hartsville of their business jet traffic. PDK is in the top 10 of moving business jets, and that's compared to 139 certificated airports as well as LGA airports. We are a business executive airport. Metro Atlanta is home to all 500 Fortune companies. So therefore, when those executives are flying, we've heard the testimony today that you build a mile of a runway, you can get anywhere in the world. Mile of asphalt for a road, just getting down the road. Wayne Shackford said that the best when I worked at DDOT. Over the last 20 years, we have seen our operations grow and decline due to the recession of 2006 and 07, and now the pandemic. But these numbers are ups and downs. PDK has been able to steadfast through the roller coaster ride. Just to give you a snapshot of what I mean, in '99 we had 230,000 operations a year. In 2007, we dropped to 215,000 operations. Still being the second busiest to all these numbers I'm talking about, and we still are today. In 2015, our numbers dropped to 147,000 operations. And just in 2020, we had 138,000 operations. What's consistent in this is our heavy business jet traffic. Those are our executives, our businessmen, our lawyers, our doctors that fly themselves from city to city to have a business in those cities and continue. We average over 400 operations a day, so we are busy. When I get airports, and I do a lot of tours with airport managers that want to come see how PDK does it. I like to tell people all the time, you play Monopoly, I play Monopoly very well. PDK is Boardwalk and Park Place on the Monopoly board. We charge that rate. On my waiting list, we've had over 200 individuals on that. We started with a $200 deposit, refundable. We just increased it to $500. It did reduce, it is refundable. But the joke is, when you have your son or your daughter, you put her name or his name on that waiting list. By the time they solo, their name will be called. Again, you must have an aircraft to get in one of our hangars. It is basically supply and demand. We do a market rent analysis every 5 years on a corporate hangar. You say, how are those hangars developed? They're usually developed by that corporation that wants to put a flight department at PDK or at Peachtree City. That's usually how it's done. Right now, I'm working on a project of developing 19 acres for corporate campus because I have a list of Fortune 500 companies that want to come to PDK. They don't want their aircraft to sit outside. You talk about the ad valorem tax on that, DeKalb County charges that. I can tell you a $23 million Cessna citation. The personal property tax is what it's called, pays $398,000 a year. That's why we want those based aircraft. PDK, right now in our master plan process list, 355. I count 406 at PDK. There's a discrepancy because it's where you use or hangar that aircraft 51% of the time. So now tax commissioners have to go out and say, well, how, where, how often does he fly? Because they want him to be based at their airport. Other airports like Vidalia have stated they only have 12. He's doing a great job. That's what we want to see happen in the rural areas in the state of Georgia, is those airports having the infrastructure they need to do that. Even as busy as PDK is, we have infrastructure issues, problems. My 5-year CIP right now has about $60 million on it. Let me go back to that 19 acres we're trying to develop. We started planning this 5 years ago. The engineer's estimate was $5 million, and that's the airport funding. We're fortunate to have revenue to do that. We don't get any funds from the county. We're self-sufficient. We're one of the few airports in the state that is self-sufficient, and I think there's only a handful of those that are self-sufficient that can do that. But even with that, 5 years ago, that 19-acre development site was listed at $6 million. Today, we're trying to put that project on the street right now. It is $12 million. That's a lot of money. And I'm talking about on the building. And this is putting the infrastructure, laying the ground pad ready so the development can come in and go straight up. That's $12 million out of an airport budget. We can't sustain that. And that's just in one corner of the airport. If you look at my 20-year master plan right now today, we have a development that will develop. It's up to, I think it's $77 million more dollars outside of the $60 million I just told you about. So infrastructure is even there, even if you have the revenue that you're charging, we're always looking at increasing that cost, but you can only go so fast going up on that before they start screaming saying, hey, I can't go there. I gotta go somewhere else. PDK is lucky enough. Number one business principle is location, location, location. PDK is inside of 285, 5 minutes north of Buckhead, about 8 minutes from downtown. And when that executive comes to town, where does he want to go? 5-star hotel, white cloth restaurant. He's not going to mom and pop just in case he wants a greasy burger or a taco somewhere. He wants white cloth. He wants space to meet other businessmen to discuss if they do not have a place in Atlanta to do so. So infrastructure is very much needed in the state. I will go on to talk about the airport is if everyone didn't know, a part of the U.S. Department of Transportation, just like the highways and roads are. A lot of us travel those roads today, or some of you came by aircraft. We use these systems on a daily basis, and they need to be maintained. I will go back and talk about jet fuel tax. Back 15 years ago, the Georgia Air Force Association started lobbying legislator for our very own tax that the state was taxing aviation fuel. At that time, that was about $35 million, and we were only receiving from the state $2 million to run that aviation program. That's not enough for 103, maybe 102 airports. That's not enough. During that same time, I led the legislative committee for the Georgia Airports Association. We did an analysis, and it was well over $600 million of projects that every airport in the state needed. And then we're fighting to get that $35 million, but they tell me that GDOT's equation is too hard to break out the aviation fuel tax, so it could go and be dedicated to the aviation program. Not sure how our brother states next door, there's North Carolina, Texas that I've heard today, make it happen to be able to invest so much into their airports program. I don't know. I don't have the silver bullet. I think as we get together in this committee and we discuss how we can move forward, how we can put more money into airports because it is needed. Georgia means business. Georgia Tech left, he said something about my air pollution. I was responding to that over there too. Yeah, we've done ground studies, lead, and we're not even a blip on the radar, but I do have community members who are out there saying that the sky is falling, but that's just not the case. I'm not gonna keep us long again. We talked about the 90-10 split, where 90% comes from the Fed, 5% comes from the state, and then the other 5% comes from our local match. We talked about the 75-25. That's still a lot of money. We were just, my engineers over here, Joseph with Michael Baker, we were just looking at, my main runway is 6,001 feet. The keel section on it, keel, meaning the middle part of it, is in bad shape. Needs to be replaced. We've got some bad slabs out there that we need to replace. Engineers estimate is about $8 million just to do the keel, not even the whole runway, but just the middle section for the land. Where are we gonna get that? We put it on our CIP, we hope it gets up there, but those projects have to compete. So I have to compete to all my other brothers and sister airport managers out here for those fundings, and safety is gonna come first. We need help from the state to assist us. And this is coming from an airport who is successful, who has means, and that's why a lot of times when an airport can't make their match, that money goes back in the pot. Carol, Steve, Mario, we got some more money, and I've got the match, usually for a project. I've designed it, I've paid it up front to design a project to put it on the shelf, to be ready for when that happens. We're just fortunate. You weren't bragging, it's just what it is. I'm not bragging, it's just what it is, it's supply and demand. But I'm here to assist you all in any way to find more funding. I fight for the little guys, not for PDK.
Mario, when we created the city of Brookhaven, did we include the city limits of does the airport inside the city limits of Brookhaven?
Yes, sir. Well, and the airport sits actually inside of Chamblee, but we fly over Brookhaven.
Okay, but does Chamblee have a property tax?
Here's how the property tax works in DeKalb County. Out of those, let's say for instance, those $398,000 I told you about, 29% goes to the school board of DeKalb County, 16% goes to Chamblee. Just had a brain fart, I'm sorry. I forget where that last piece went to. It is split up in 3 ways: the school board, city of Chamblee, and DeKalb County.
One of the things that your village is mid-20s, Sydney, where you're at.
Yes, sir.
And that $1 million airplane, said because I did get my calculator out and refresh my brain. I'm trying to do it off my head.
Yes.
That $1 million airplane come pay. In most any county or location in Georgia, at least $10,000 a year in property taxes. So when we talk about Hope and her airport, she don't get the revenue from the property taxes, but there's a lot of airports that say, hey, we operate this as part of our local government, and that revenue stream comes back to them. So,
and I don't get the revenue either. Let me just state that too. The revenue doesn't come back to the airport. Like I said, it goes to the school board, it goes to the city of Chamblee, and it goes to DeKalb County.
Well, you said that was even the problem when there was a fuel tax, and $38 million was raised by that tax, but the Department of Transportation didn't divvy that back to aviation.
They said it was too hard of an equation to break to figure out they know the money was going in the pot, but how to get the money out was the problem.
So they only got 2. So, I mean, even if there was a fuel tax today, who's to say what we get back out?
Well, and that's where legislature could state or make law or some kind of way that says that the aviation fuel tax that goes back to GDOT, if they're in control of the pot of money, then the we know what that tax is, should go to the aviation program in the state of Georgia. I'll give you one more infrastructure need. I have probably about 800 international flights a year at PDK. I mean, folks that come in from Bahamas, Cape Coops, Mexico, some from Canada, that just come straight in Atlanta PDK. Customs has approached me and said, we're gonna stop that. They come from this airport, this is the port of Atlanta for Customs, US Border Patrol. They get a call, it's scheduled, they arrive an hour before the flight lands, and there's no fee. Not my problem, they don't charge for that. What is happening now, they said they're gonna stop clearing aircraft at PDK unless we build them a facility to their specs. Their specs will cost me $1 million to build a facility, for me to maintain it, just to have Customs clear those aircraft.
Which I think Cobb County spent for.
And they turn around and lease it, right?
No,
They just want it.
no, they just want it. Cobb County, and I've been talking to Carl, he says, oh, he spent about $1 million, or the FBO spent about $1 million.
Okay.
Because I took his million and doubled it, because right now, construction costs is through the roof. Steel, concrete, asphalt, you name it, it's through the
Don't
roof.
you love government?
I was telling somebody earlier, I don't like politics, but I'm stuck right in the middle of it.
Are you guys outside of the proposed Buckhead City?
Yes. They don't want it with us.
Mario, thank you
Yes,
for
sir.
your comments, and if there are no other questions, then we're gonna let call it quits.
Yes, sir.
Pretty late in the day. I wanna thank everybody for being here. We will do at least one more meeting, so that probably that'll be where we'll wrap it up. But one of the things that at our next meeting, we will be going up I-85, because we're all realize, okay, where's the economic development engine, what's going on? We'll be at the Jackson County facility. We may be, they have believe it or not, they have an ag center close to their airport, which has much better meeting room facilities. But then we'll take a tour of their airport, kind of what's going on, and take a look at some of that. So I'd encourage everybody to stay tuned and participate. You know, I want to comment on our break staff. You know, they setting everything up for us and keeping us pointed in the right direction. So, Alex, Ben, Emily said thank y'all for what you're doing. And we stand adjourned, Mr. Chairman.
Don't leave out Abby.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, Abby, oh my goodness. And Franklin and some of our other folks that are working and keeping our videos going, so. And Marcy says that she has included everybody for lunch today, or committee members. All our committee members. Oh, darn, Marcy. Thank y'all much.